Hi, my name's Leonard Andy and I'm a Djiru traditional owner of the Mission Beach area. Well, where I'm standing now is at Bingle Bay, North Mission Beach. This is the northern part of Djiru country. It has a lot of history in this area, and what is behind me is what's left of a tidal creek. Historically, the sandbar here was out further. There's historical photos of traditional huts on the actual sand dune. In our language they're called midges. But because of the Cutton brothers that were here, some of our early pioneers, or their pioneers, decided they'd have a plantation here, and they cleared a lot of land going behind us, west of us. They were growing coconuts, coffee, tea, and their plantation was really large. It's changed a lot of this area historically because they've cleared large areas that have houses today. And at the moment there's probably 6 Djiru people living here in Mission, or in Bingle Bay. And the name Bingle means a camping place with good water. My aunties remember coming here and getting turtle eggs. And they also used to camp here in the 60s. But then it used to be a lot different. Today it's a tourist place. It's still Djiru country, but it's really changed, especially the beachfront here. And we think that it's going to change more because we've had landslides on the road driving from Narrabeen Beach south of us here. And I don't know, they just keep trying to fix the road up. We've got rock walls. We've had mangrove between, say, Bingle Bay and Narrabeen Beach disappear because of the rock walls. And I don't think the road will be here in maybe 30 years or even less because of the ocean, and it's constantly being eaten away. About maybe 200 metres north of me is a camping ground, the Bingle Bay camping ground. And the Djiru people have got a lease to occupy it for 3 years from the council. The council wanted to give us a 30-year lease, but we said no, because we don't think that camping ground and area will be there in 30 years. There's a plaque in the rock there for John Booth, one of the early conservationists. I've been asked if we would want a plaque in the rock commemorating that place there as the last Djiru occupation site on country. But putting a piece of metal in a rock is not very cultural for us. That's where I'm standing now. Today is called Ninny Point. The name comes from non-Indigenous historical records because a lady that lived at Narrabeen Beach south of us used to come here and visit an old Aboriginal couple that were camping here. And then the authorities found out about them, and when she came back to visit them, they were gone. And they were probably removed to Palm Island. And the lady's name was Ninny, and that's why we've got Ninny Point today. They were probably the last Djiru people to be removed off country. Where I'm standing now is nearly in the middle of Bingle Bay on the foreshore. And we've got a barbecue, a visitor area, and a car park and a toilet block behind me. But this area here was one of the camps of the Djiru people. But it would have got destroyed and the people removed, like when the Cutton brothers came. Today it's for everybody else. There's no signage or no acknowledgement of what was here. And some of the Djiru people think that it should be. But then others aren't exactly happy that you've got a toilet block and a car park in a camping area. Well, my aunties used to come here in the 60s. They were telling me, and some of my older cousins remember, like in the early 70s, camping here and getting turtle eggs because there were turtle nests along here. But today, I don't know, because there's a lot of dogs, a lot of activity on the beach. It's not what it used to be. A lot of people have talked about marine craft with the Aboriginals. In our area here, we didn't have outriggers. Our people had bark canoes. But we've seen photos with people down around the Capricorn coast. Also, we've seen outriggers north of Cairns. But here, our people would have seen it with our visitors, because we had visitors that were not Aboriginal. Islanders from further north, they would have seen them because we had visitors. They weren't always good intentions. They come to steal. Really, they come to steal women. And our people, they didn't get on with them. They knew about the bow and arrow, but no one adopted it. Where I'm standing now, today this is called Narrabeen Beach. It's just south of Bingle Bay. But the name comes from non-Indigenous knowledge, historical knowledge. Because the lady said it was called Narrabeen Beach, named after a mythical Aboriginal legend. When I asked some of my elders, they told me that they didn't even know that name and knew nothing of it. And she probably only made a mistake by calling it Narrabeen, because the old people know it as Djaragan. That's language name for scrubbing. It was special for our people because there was camping grounds, also a cultural site that we haven't told the Europeans about. And it's still being debated among the group. And even though I've been to this site, it's a woman's place. I had to go in the late 90s to show some old men that knew about it, but had never been there. But only one old man could come. The other guy, he wasn't too good, his legs. And plus he was at least 91 or 92. But I've got to talk to some women about this site. And some of our women have never been to this site or don't even know about it. And it's a female birthing site. And at the moment we don't have too much protection about some of our cultural heritage, because I'd hate to see a walking track and signage and it becoming a tourist spot or anything like some of the other local spots around the area, because I don't think we can protect it. Djiru people, that is. Where I'm standing now is the northern end of Mission Beach. Historically, there's a bora ground within 300 to 400 metres of where I'm standing. Today there's a house built on it. In the 90s it was a bed and breakfast, but now it's a private residence. My father's uncle, he remembers going to this area, but he was only a young boy, so he wasn't allowed to actually go to the ceremony at the bora ground. But people would come here and camp. Some of the Mamu people have stories from their great-grandparents of arriving by canoe in the bay. But there's also stories of Djiru people coming down here to the Bora ground for ceremony. And the Bora ground, it's like a courthouse. It's where people settle disputes, not just men, women, and everything is done with weapons. Men would fight men, women would fight women, but a woman could go up and challenge a man if she wanted to. They had Pacific weapons, and there were rules, but people did die from injuries. And if a man couldn't continue and stand up, that was the end of the fight. It wasn't a fight to the death, because there was rules. And if you lost, you could always wait a couple of months for another fighting corroboree. And they were held in all our areas within our language group. They might have one here, and then a couple of months later they'd have one down around Tully on Gulnay country. And then they'd have one maybe at Girramay country around Cardwell, and even Ravenshoe. And because of the point, this was a high resource area. And this is one of our first massacre sites here. They said they only killed old people because if old people couldn't go travelling, they were left in the camping area to look after the camp. The European concept of a village is not an Aboriginal concept of a village. Sometimes people were grouped together, other times you have family groups, and they're not like 3 metres, 5 metres beside you. The people spread out and lived to have privacy with their family groups. That's why the massacre extended right along, but here was our first massacre site. I don't know if we all want to put signage about massacre sites, because every day I walk through about 2 or 3. You don't forget about it, you just put it back in your mind. The guys that did the massacre to do with the Maria shipwreck stayed with Rupert Femby, and they rowed in here. It's all been recorded. It's supposed to have been on a Wednesday like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they rowed their boats in and started here and went south. After they had already done a little island search over at Dunk. And they reported that they dispersed a few Aboriginals at the southern end. Today it's called Coconut Beach. When you go there, you've got a reef, Stingray Reef. You can swim out to it, it's not far. And it's a green zone under the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park zoning. But in that beach, at the back of it, is Palm Valley. We've been there in the past finding axe heads, and it's got heavy leaf cover. You'd walk along with a stick and just rake it in the ground, and when you found you hit something, you'd dig it up. And there's heaps of axe heads there. Also the National Park walking track, I think I haven't been there for a while, but it did go through a midden. Where I'm sitting is part of the Mission Beach Clump Point Safe Boating Facility. I'm sitting on the rock wall on the western side facing the bay. And where I'm sitting is probably 30 metres away from a stone alignment from one of our fish traps. When this facility was built, they told us that they could protect our fish trap by putting bricks over it and then extending the car park out into the bay here. Except we didn't agree to it, but we didn't agree to the whole facility. So they left the stone alignment there. But this bay is a very high cultural resource area. We used to find axe heads further in the bay at low tide in the mud. This bay will never be the same because of this facility. It's a native tidal area. This facility is managed by the council, but it was put in by the state and federal governments. The point behind us, and this is part of the point, is the only Cenozoic basalt headland in the wet tropics, where basalt boulders run down into the sea, and it's also a rare spot because you have kangaroo grass growing on this basalt. But that didn't save it from this facility being made. Where I'm standing now is some freshwater lagoons. They used to run for a couple of 100 metres north of us and south of us. This flows into Wongling Creek, and the mouth is a couple of 100 metres south of us. The lagoons are important because you had fresh water so close to the sea. You have fresh water on one side of the sand dune and you have ocean on the other. It was also good for drinking, preparing food, and also it was a little hunting area for bungaroo, for freshwater turtles. Also they ate the bottoms of the lilies for food. And not far away we found in the past shell middens of small cockle shells. In the past we've done work on the front of the lagoon with anthropologists, and we found a large quartz scatter which was about at least half a metre round but about maybe 20 centimetres high, and it was shards of white quartz. And we were surprised to find it there because 30 metres away was a large scrub hen nest, yet they'd never touched the quartz scatter. When we went back to look for it after Cyclone Larry in 2006, it was gone with a storm surge. There was an application a long time ago for another resort south of Castaways Resort. The reason the resort didn't go ahead because they wanted a relocation of the site. The people wanted the resort to be shifted on the eastern side of the lagoon and up on top of the dune. It would have killed this lagoon. This lagoon is already half dead from runoff from houses, subdivisions, and when people clean and prune their yards, they usually throw the rubbish over the fence, and then it ends up in the creek and it travels. We've got two types of heliconas here. There's this type here with the orange flower, and further back along the walk here we've got another hybrid of the heliconas. In the past you could see further up this lagoon, but now it's overgrown. In language it's called yanga when land isn't managed properly, and that's what this is. You could look up before and you could see water. Now it's all overgrown. You've got runoff, drains and pollution. I'm at Garner's Beach at the moment, one of the northernest beaches on Djiru country. It's a high resource area because maybe 150 to 200 metres north of me in that direction is Mariah Creek and the mouth where it runs into the ocean. It's a large tidal stream and it separates Curramine Beach from Garner's. There's crocodiles, sharks, turtles, and in the past you would have had a lot more seagrass here and dugongs. Also there was camps along here, but some of these places were the first places to be destroyed because it's called Garner's Beach after a family of pioneers that took up land in the back here. Once the Europeans came, the Aboriginals could not do a lot of things. You might see one or two, but you would not see 50 or 100 Aboriginals in the ocean at once, or walking on the beaches, because in the past that was a war party, according to people, and they'd come back and deal with you even if they never saw that 100, they'd come back and raid villages. In this area here also, we've got islands out to the north of us called the Bernards. One of our elders in the past, Pompey Clump Point, he took his name, or his family name, from Clump Point Lookout. He was born over here at the Bernards, His mother was Mamu and his father was Djiru. And his family was at the Bernards, the guys that were doing beach demur. They didn't put single people out there, they put families. Because a single person can swim away or make a raft out of log. They'd put families there with children, so they had to stay there. And the only way they would leave is when the beach demur fishermen took them off the island and put them on the mainland. And they were the lucky ones, because others were transported further north to other islands to process beach demur. Where I'm standing now is at Maria Creek, the mouth. This is the northern boundary of Djiru country. What you can see behind me is a sand spit on the other side of the creek. It wasn't always there, because some of the Europeans further up the creek did some work against the banks, and then all of a sudden this sand spit started to form. But we know it wasn't there in the past. And this area just north of us with the sand spit and the beach in the background, today it's called Carramine Beach, but that's a mispronunciation. It should be called Garrimine, place of the sunrise. But they haven't really changed it yet. And it's Mamu country. Our next tribe up. And there's 5 groups of the Mamu. This is the southernest group. It goes to Innisfail and just into Flying Fish Point and just north of there. But these were our neighbours, and there was a lot of intermarriage. This is the memorial for the Hull River settlement. It's a contemporary view and construction of a traditional midja, a traditional rainforest hut. And this plaque here talks about before and after contact. These guys do not have grey hair. That is Gayambulla feather stuck in their hair, white cockatoo, the little fluff feathers, and it's stuck in their hair with Bubadilla, milky pine sap. Here you can see these guys. They're Girame from around Cardwell. And how I can tell is their shield design. They have like really abstract shield design. Around their neck, today you would have heard of some seeds called false sandalwood. They're a little red shiny seed that today people make necklaces and earrings out of. That's what's around his neck. And the sword, it's called Bagar in language. That was one of the main weapons that they fight with. And you can see here, it looks like a boomerang, but it's a little throwing stick shaped like a boomerang, but it hasn't got a right bend. It's made a little tiny curve. What they call boomerangs, that's part of Australian assimilation language. Here it's called One-Island language. Other boomerangs are not all the same, they have different names. You have the cross boomerang, that's Biribu Biribu. That basket here, it's not a Jawan. Jawan is another type of basket with smaller horns. Baskets like this for carry baby, and only one family make it now, and that's in the Biron family, and they're the only ones that make it. And this basket, the base there will be about that wide, and it's a basket to carry baby in. Our people knew about the bow and arrow because we have raiders, visitors with bad intentions that come from further north. Our people never adopted the bow and arrow because they considered the spear and the woomera to be more powerful and have longer range, but have more power and impact. What some of the things people would do if they ran up close to someone they speared is they'd jump up in the air and spear down and try and drive the spear through their body and into the ground. so it pins them there. And then they'd put more spears in them. Plus, over a short range, a spear with a woomera, if it hit you in the chest, it's going to knock you off your feet. And with a bow and an arrow, you might be able, the size of our shields, they'll take those arrows, because the shields were very big. The woomera is like an extension of your arm. It gives you so much more power. And a big spear that was maybe 3-4 meters long, you'd probably end up half of the spear sticking out the other side. You also make little tiny spears that are probably my height. Yeah. Those are little spears that usually, not so much for fighting, mainly for hunting. And hunting in thick forest and hunting above in the canopy. They also used for hunting humans, because you'd carry it in a bundle of 10 or 15 tied in cane, and you can put it on your back. Only got a little woomera. Climb up tree, use it, swim across rivers, run through the thickest forest. Not a spear that's 3 meters long. You won't be able to travel real fast with that, but it's a little tiny spear. And they were still using it after the Christians came, because I was told a story by one of the old fellows that one of my father's uncles at Pinnacle Pocket at Yungaburra, there was a black church. And while they were there, some Jitterbul men turned up at night, all armed with little tiny spears, and they were looking for someone. Except that person wasn't at the church service that day, or that night. But they had come from other side of Ravenshoe to hunt that person. And this is our Aboriginal memorial to the Hull River settlement. The name Mission Beach, for me and for the Aboriginal people, is a lie. The so-called locals that were not Aboriginals called it a mission, but the real name is the Hull River settlement. It was a penal colony. If you paid up in missions or reservations, this is where they sent you. Some people came here voluntary because family was here. Other people were brought here in chains. Others were roped up together, tied together with rope and brought here by the native police. And it was from Aboriginals from all around the area. We were even told there were 3 Torres Strait Islanders here. People say between 400 to 600 people. But at that time, Djiru was already a minority. We had already had our massacres. So a lot of these people that were brought here, they were Aboriginals, but they weren't from here. We know that there was heaps of Walkarugabar, that's around Townsville, Girramay, Jitterbul, Marmoo. It's like everyone in the area. But also there were people brought from further north, like from places like Kowanyama. And they were all put here. My father's uncle said that there was never enough food. The boat would drop off food, but all the white fellas get all the choice cuts, and the Aboriginals were left with whatever's left. The superintendent gave them a boat that they could go out and get turtle, and they said that with the boat sometimes they had to stop because it was only a little tiny boat to let the herd of dugongs pass, because they couldn't go into the herd. You had bulls there protecting calves. They'd charge the boat. So they'd have to wait to let the dugongs go past, and they talked of herds of dugongs before they went out to get turtle. My great-grandmother was here, my father's uncle, Djiru, but not many. Because today when we do our genealogy, we're all the descendants of 9 people. There's a 10th family, but for our native title and genealogy, we're all descendants of 9 survivors. And we were greatly outnumbered. Well, this guy is my father's uncle. He married my grandfather's sister. He's Jitterbul, but he's not from Ravenshoe. He's from up at the headwaters of the Tully River. He was brought here by native police He was my main informant about what it was like here before the cyclone, after the cyclone. Also, he was my main informant about social issues because he told me that at the Murray Upper, it was called the Murray Upper Reservation. Today it's called the Jumbin Community. It was a holding area for when people get sent from Palm before they get sent out to the stations. My mother's parents were even sent there. Well, my grandmother was Kukuyalanji and my grandfather was Wanyi from out near Camel, but they were all sent to Palm. But they were sent to Murray Upper Reservation after they got their papers to be let off the island. My mother's still got hers. She was 14 at the time. The children all got paperwork too. And they stayed at Murray Upper before they got sent to, then it was called Kirrama Station. Today it's called Budgerballa and run by 3 Aboriginal tribes. And this is a picture of my father. My father was a Christian preacher. It tells about the police and about walking in the water, because when people walked on the beach, you don't let nobody see you, no white man. And when you walked on the sand on the beach, you walk in the water so your tracks are hidden, because if someone see it, they go tell the native police, and next thing you'll be getting rounded up. In this picture here, this is my father's grandmother. The European name she took was Minnie, but her language name is Bainu. She ran away to Innisfail with her sister just after the 1918 cyclone. They crossed many rivers, they made rafts, and her sister was pregnant, like nearly ready to have the baby. They got as far as Marillion Harbour, and on the rocks on the southern side, her sister had her baby, and her baby was half Malay, and his name was John Assan. Today his descendants are Auntie Ray Kelly and her family in Innisfail, and that's how we're related to them through blood. This is Ernie Grant. He's a Djiru elder. He's still alive today. He's with the group Not at Ravenshoe. He's mobber at the headwaters of the Tully River. And this is his mother here, Chloe. She survived the 1918 cyclone. She was a servant in Superintendent Kenny's house when he died, but she survived. We had a lot of different people here. These are Gulnay, and Gulnay is the area around the Tully River. A couple of these people are still alive today, but this old fellow here is called Pop Kinjin, and my father used to go up Uramo, up the Davison, and pick him up and take him to church. And when they finished church, he'd take him back and drop him off. He lived in an area called the Dip, near the Tully River. Underneath it was a high house, but underneath he had spears, swords, shields, all stuck up in the rafters. And when my father would bring him back from church, they'd stop there, have a cup of tea and all that. I think there was only about maybe 2 of us then, me and one brother, and the others weren't born, but he'd sit underneath the house and sing in language. People have seen him do things. White people that are still alive today, they've said they've seen him make rain, call horses to make horses make a circle around him. But he was the last of his era. Sing to crocodile, call crocodiles. And we've got another panel over here, and this is some of the Murray Upper mob. Uncle Jack Morita, his mother was Aboriginal, but his father was Japanese. We had Japanese as well as Chinese here. We had Japanese-owned sugarcane farms in North Queensland, because at that time Japan and Australia were friends. And this other old guy here, Uncle Claude, he's Girame too. He can't walk now. Yeah, he's got a walker and he can't walk. His oldest brother was one of my teachers, but when he died, then they made Uncle Claude the elder in the community, and then I started talking to him. Before, I never talked to him or say hello and that. but his older brother was my teacher. This old fellow here, he's from the Biri tribal group around Bowen, but he was born here, and his name's Peter Pryor. I'm related to him from on my mother's side, but that's only because of intermarriage on Palm Island. There was more than 40 groups they put there, mixed them all together. One of ours, he's called a Gubi in language, but white fellas call them sorcerers, magicians. Well, one of ours, Djiru Gubis, Pompey Clumb Point, him and another guy made a few men disappear because there were so many tribal sorcerers from other groups there. And I talked to an old lady that's still alive on Palm, and I was telling her about something, what some of the sorcerers would do. And she said that she saw some of Pompey Clumb Point's work and make a dead man walk, they used to say on the island. And she's seen what he had done when she was a little girl. And now she's in her 80s. But there was a lot of conflict on the island. When they put him on the island, there was people from, that they call them the sundowners, the western people from the dry country. Because my grandmother said everybody stayed in separate areas. Rainforest mob stayed separate from the others around Townsville and Bowen. The sundowners lived in a separate part of the island, that's all the dry country people. But eventually they intermarried. But when they first put them there, they were separate. Older people told me that they saw my grandmother when she was a young woman with a 3/4 axe stuck in her head. Because she had a fight with another Aboriginal lady and beat that lady, and then she was sitting down at a table and the woman came up from behind and stuck the axe in her skull. The man that told me about this story, he's dead now, but my grandmother used to nurse him. And that's why he said, yeah, he's seen her, and she come walking down the hill to the superintendent's office with a 3/4 axe stuck in her head, but didn't kill her. And she survived, but there was heaps of violence on that island, and probably still is. Well, the Hull River settlement that has been called Mission Beach today was destroyed in 1918 by a cyclone, and the people were kept down here at South Mission on the dunes. There's a memorial for the superintendent up on high ground on a hill just west of us. And the people were not allowed to leave. A storm surge came in and my father's uncle said people were taken out to sea. They used a little boat to go and look for bodies. A lot of people they didn't find. And he said that because they were young boys, they're not allowed to touch dead people. Adult men picked up the dead people, but young boys, you could dig graves. And he said they dug graves in sand to bury the bodies. We don't really know how many because there's so many conflicting reports of numbers. After that, they run away. He's told other people that they were told to run when they were here and hide because he said the sand was stinging their legs and their back because they had no clothes. And the sand from the wind with the cyclone. And they had to run, the people told them. After the cyclone, they decided not to rebuild, and the foundations of Palm Island settlement are here because they didn't rebuild. They put the people on a ship and they sent them to Palm, and that's what created Palm Island. Today those people are called Bulgaman. That's a name for the historical people. The traditional owners of Palm Island are Munburra. They are a minority on that island. Because today they tell me there's nearly 5,000 people on the island that live there. I've got family from on my father's side, my mother's side, on the island, on an island I've never been. My grandmother used to tell me stories But how she remembered Palm Island was from a different time. You had Mango Avenue. It was an avenue where only the white people lived on the island, and only white people were allowed to go. We still have a Djiru man that used to drive a horse and buggy and deliver milk from the dairy, but the delivery places were at the back of the houses. He said you were never allowed on that avenue. Today it's still there. It's called Mango Avenue, and it's only where the white people lived. And they talked about if you didn't tip your hat to the white man, you get a week locked up. But I'll be going to Palm in a month's time. My grandmother used to always want me to go. Her cousins would tell you things like, oh boy, well they call you boy. They'd say things like, oh boy, you might get disappointed and depressed when you see what's there. And there's things on that island that the tourists don't see, or don't get, or not the tourists, government don't get to see. And in Palm Island today, they've got compounds. No white people live there permanently. Doctors, nurses, school teachers. It's just like any other place up the Cape. They've got compounds with barbed wire, security cameras. They've got security guards. It's a place, you know how they tell you can live anywhere in Australia? Well, you can't live there if you're white. Just like Arakoon, Lockhart. Yeah, all those former reservations. Australia has what? A hidden history as well as a hidden present story. They don't tell the tourists and the new Aussies about some of this past. To them it's the lucky country. And for every nationality coming here or refugee, it is the lucky country. But to have lucky, you know, like hot and cold? Because to have lucky, you've got to have unlucky. Because how do you know what lucky is if you haven't been unlucky? And the Aboriginals are the unlucky. Everyone else come here, it's the lucky country.